Recently, it is said that China suddenly lost its temper. It's even reported that they raised their voice and got furious in front of President Trump. It seems like they might have lost their cool a bit. The reason for China's sudden outburst is said to be Japan. Today, let's take a closer look at this issue. Let's get right into it. As you all know, there was a US-China summit in May. But a Financial Times report said President Xi Jinping was seen raising his voice and appearing agitated. It is said that this was the moment when President Xi Jinping showed the most emotion during the US-China summit. This happened when he directly criticized Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida. President Xi Jinping strongly criticized Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Japan's increased defense spending, according to the Financial Times. It's said President Trump was so surprised that he calmly explained Japan's position. President Trump said that because of North Korea's rising threat, Japan needed a more proactive security approach. However, President Xi Jinping reportedly raised his voice in anger and strongly stated that Japan's biggest security concern is not North Korea, but China. According to the Financial Times, this was the most intense moment during the two-day US-China summit. This topic itself had not been discussed during the summit preparations and came up unexpectedly. In fact, the reason China is reacting so sensitively is also related to Japan's rearmament. Prime Minister Takaichi stated in November 2025 that military intervention would be justified if China invaded Taiwan. In response, China has imposed restrictions on rare earth exports to Japan and limited tourism to Japan. For now, Japan's rearmament is quite serious. Prime Minister Takaichi mentioned constitutional amendment goals on April 12. In his party Congress speech, he said the time had come and wanted to propose a constitutional amendment at next year's Congress. The Japanese people appeared to welcome this. When Prime Minister Takaichi announced at the LDP Party Congress that he aims to propose a constitutional amendment next spring, more than half, 60%, responded positively. Only 29% responded negatively. This shows that the majority of the Japanese people are in favor of constitutional amendment. There is another point here that deserves more attention. Japan's defense budget for 2026 has been set at a staggering 84.3 trillion won. That's nearly 3 trillion won more than last year, the largest ever in Japan. Japan has raised its defense budget for 14 straight years, and this increase was especially significant. The most notable part of this budget proposal was the equipment procurement cost. Some say the Japanese government is now fully focused on gaining offensive capabilities. Japan is focusing on acquiring enemy-based strike capabilities and greatly expanding its long-range missile forces. At the same time, Japan is also speeding up the establishment of a coastal defense shield to protect the surrounding waters. To this end, they are also working to expand drone operation capabilities and strengthen unmanned surveillance systems. The Japanese government is also seeking hypersonic guided missiles that travel over 5 times the speed of sound. Because hypersonic weapons are hard to counter with current air defense systems, China and Russia are reacting very strongly. And starting in 2026, Japan will also begin operational deployment of the American Tomahawk cruise missile. Preparations for the deployment of the Tomahawk are already well underway within the Japanese self-defense forces. The integration with the US operational system is reportedly in its final stage. Japan aims to acquire up to 400 Tomahawk missiles, but some deliveries are delayed due to the Middle East war involving the United States. The Tomahawk missile is a long-range cruise missile capable of low-altitude penetration and precise strikes, even against strong air defenses. It can be launched from both surface ships and submarines, and is considered a very important weapon for securing long-range attack capabilities. Currently, Japan is working to equip 8 active destroyers with Tomahawk missiles, and plans to deploy these missiles on 2 newly constructed destroyers as well. Japan is now rapidly changing from a defense-oriented country to a military nation with long-range strike capabilities. On top of that, Japan continues to take actions that could provoke President Xi Jinping to react aggressively. According to Japan's Yomiuri Shimbun, President Xi Jinping has identified Prime Minister Takaichi and Taiwan's President Lai Ching-te as figures threatening regional peace, and even pressured President Trump not to support them. President Trump disagreed and reportedly praised Prime Minister Takaichi's leadership. Japan says China has used pressure and threats, so Japan is working harder to strengthen its military and expand its partnerships. Right now, the Japanese government is considering introducing unmanned aerial vehicles equipped with early warning radars and redeploying mobile radars on key Pacific islands to fill surveillance gaps in the Pacific. China's aircraft carrier activity in the Pacific has surged, so Japan wants to restrain China's military presence there. It's understandable, as Chinese aircraft carrier entries into the Pacific rose from 2 in 2022 to 5 in 2025. Chinese carrier-based aircraft takeoffs and landings jumped from 320 to 1,460, showing China's ongoing intent to extend into the Pacific. China strongly opposes Japan's actions. The Liberation Army Daily, the Central Military Commission's official publication, criticized Japan's recent boost to its unmanned equipment, calling it a dangerous and offensive move. Japan signed a confidential information sharing agreement with the Philippines, creating a framework for both nations to share military secrets more closely. The Philippines is in conflict with China and plans to intervene if China invades Taiwan. Japan is exporting surveillance and control radars to the Philippines, enabling expected security cooperation using the data gathered by the Philippines. Exporting the Type 88 anti-ship guided missile to the Philippines is also under consideration. The Philippine military is clearly focused on strengthening its forces. But in fact, if you look closely at the current situation, many analyses say that one of the biggest reasons for Japan's rearmament is China. Japan's shift wasn't a sudden independent move toward aggression. Instead, China's military actions and pressure have significantly altered Japan's domestic mood. China has repeatedly raised the possibility of invading Taiwan in recent years and is rapidly increasing military activities in the East and South China Seas. From Japan's perspective, they believe that China's military power has reached a level that directly threatens their national security. In fact, Japan currently defines China as its greatest strategic threat. The number of times Chinese aircraft carriers have entered the Pacific has also increased rapidly, and the frequency of Chinese military aircraft and vessels operating near Japanese waters and airspace has risen significantly as well. From the Japanese government's perspective, they argue that in this situation they have no choice but to strengthen their military power. And right now, many analysts say that what China fears most is not Japan rearming on its own. China really fears the growing security alliance linking the US, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, and Taiwan. From China's view, neighboring countries increasingly resemble a unified military network. The US and Japan are quickly merging their missile operation and information sharing systems. Japan is introducing US-made Tomahawk missiles, and the US is actively involving the Japanese self-defense forces and even the Philippines in this. The Philippines is a country that continues to clash with China over the South China Sea issue. Recently, there has even been talk of promoting a military information protection agreement with Japan, and the introduction of Japanese-made radars and military equipment is also expanding. From China's perspective, they can't help but be concerned that their activities in the South China Sea may become increasingly restricted. Australia also maintains strong security ties with the United States and is expanding joint military exercises with Japan. As the Chinese Navy expands into the Pacific, Australia has strengthened security ties with Japan. Adding the Taiwan issue makes the situation even more sensitive. Japan believes that a contingency in Taiwan is directly linked to its own security, and the United States continues to express its commitment to defending Taiwan. China sees this entire trend as extremely dangerous. From China's perspective, a structure is being formed in which it is being checked simultaneously in the East China Sea, the South China Sea, and toward the Pacific. Japan boosting military ties with the Philippines, integrating missile systems with the US, and enhancing training with Australia puts significant pressure on China. If South Korea cooperates too, China's sense of crisis will inevitably increase. Korea is partially involved in US-Japan-Korea security cooperation, and ongoing calls highlight the need for information sharing to keep China in check. From China's perspective, it is highly likely that they will be very sensitive to the situation where countries keeping them in check are linked up across the seas. So, the reason why China is reacting particularly strongly to the Japan issue right now is not just because of Japan alone, but because of their anxiety about the trend of neighboring countries moving together at the same time. This view continues to come up. But honestly, if you think about it, it really feels like China brought this upon themselves.